It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool book. Some of my old trapping catalogs, my lure business in South Dakota. So this is a whole life before I got on TV, making the videos and all these people I learned from, how to trap minks, and this is my very first bear hunting video, the big timber bears. That was a picture. You can see I had that fox trapper hat on. It's
my coffee over here, right?
Yeah, I think so. Well, that's coffee, yeah.
I'll talk to you about my copy of the book later.
Yeah. But so anyway, so that's I've sold. There's a tape or something on that. There must be a hole in the deal. This book. This is the Super Slam book. So my foreword was done by Shockey and Bill Jordan on this one. And it talks, there's a trapping thing of me, a little chapter at the very beginning of how I got started. And there's me with my airplane checking traps. There's some pictures of that in the book. There's a whole chapter, cool. a whole part on me getting my license and explains all the stuff I told you about before. In South Dakota.
All right, well, welcome back to another episode of the Hunt Suburbia podcast, part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah, we were on top of the mountain there for part 1, and now we're sitting here in my family deer camp. That's where it all started for me. Grew up hunting out of here, and looked at the list up here. Shows all the deer kills there. Many spike horns.
Yeah,
a lot of small deer.
I bet you a lot of stories been told in this little cabin.
Oh yeah, they have. Yep, I mean, some of my earliest, best memories is my bunk was up here on the other side of that wall. And, as a kid, I'd go to sleep before all the old timers, and they'd be up here, out here playing cards right here at the table, drinking, having a good time, telling stories, and I'd pretend like I was sleeping. But I was just listening, I could peek over the top and look down and watch what was going on. And
very cool.
That was just some of the best times, the best memories, and so it's an honor to have you here at camp, and we've got 2 of Tom's books here, and I can't wait to read through them. But we were just going through the Trapper book. So this Master Trapper book that you put out, I'd like to talk a little bit, first of all, how you got the book, when you wrote it during COVID, right?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
And what does this book mean to you? It looks like a piece of art here.
Well, originally, to me, business is about not just doing what you want to do, but thinking things through and doing something that might make a difference for somebody else, you know. It's not really about telling my life story as a trapper so much as it is maybe trying to pull together a formula of why somebody would want to be a trapper, why somebody would want to put the time and effort into it, and what it can mean to somebody who really gets involved in being a trapper, and what it meant to me too, because the work ethic that I learned from being a trapper really made me the man that I am today. I mean, that and the fact that my parents, raised me right, and gave me good ethics and gave me the latitude to be able to follow my dreams, follow what I wanted to do. And all that gets built into these books. But they're put together in such a way that you learn to respect the men that came before you, and women for that matter, that were trappers or bow hunters that, kind of paved the way for everybody. Yeah. And trapping especially is the type of a sport where a lot of the old secrets die with the trappers, that was like how they learned to catch the mink and how they learned to catch the marten and fisher and all the animals. They didn't really show anybody else. So they didn't show anybody their little hiding spots or their places where they actually caught the animals. And so it was hard. There was a point in time when it was very difficult to learn how to be a trapper unless your grandfather did it and he handed down the knowledge, and which developed into a cottage industry. There were several trappers like E.J. Daly, Stanley Hallbacker, who started a cottage industry of writing books and booklets and pamphlets about how to trap a fox and how to make a dirt hole set and some of the things that they did. And they made money off of their books, and they made money off the trapping lures that they made. And they started their own little cottage industries, but they also trapped as well. And it's really an interesting concept of what they did. And it was a formula that I followed myself when I got old enough to realize that I could maybe have my own lure formulas and use those lures to catch the animals that I was after, and I turned it into a business. You know, and it worked out well.
So that's you there on the cover holding up, what do you got, coyote furs there?
Coyote pelts, yeah.
Yep.
My cabin.
And that's E.J. Daly that you mentioned, correct?
That's E.J. Daly's artist rendition, and Stanley Hallbacker.
Yep.
And this is Bear Claw from the Jeremiah Johnson movie.
Yep.
So all influences on me.
So E.J. Daly, can we talk about him a little bit? He was in the Adirondacks, right?
Absolutely.
And we're not too far from the Adirondacks here.
That's right.
And there's a lot of hunters in the Adirondacks that listen to the podcast and stuff, so they might be interested in hearing a little bit about E.J. Daly.
Yeah, well, E.J. Daly, he was a writer, a trapper, and he connected early on with a man who started the Fur Fish Game magazine. Well, he originally started the Hunter Trader Trapper magazine. His name was Arthur Harding. In 1900, they started that magazine, Hunter Trader Trapper, and in 1925 they started Fur Fish Game. And this was E.J. Daly's rise to fame because he started writing in the magazines and showing his secrets and what he did in the magazines.
Yep.
And he had his own little business. He had his own little shop. He had his own lure line, and he would sell trapping supplies, and became very well known through the magazine, and really was an innovator in the early years of making trapping lures and scents and marketing the methods of how to trap. And so he was one of the forefathers of trapping, modern day cottage industry trapping. And Hallbacker was similar, except for he was from Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, these guys were real innovators of their time, and they learned to turn their hobby and love of trapping into a business, and they did quite well with it.
And talking about E.J. Daly, and forgive me, what's the name of the magazine again? The oldest one? Fur Fish Game?
Hunter Trader Trapper and
Okay,
Fur Fish
yep.
Game, yes.
So here's a little snippet here called, it's the question box. And tell me about your connection with E.J. Daly on the question box.
Yeah, so E.J. Daly started doing the question box in 1925 when the Fur Fish Game magazine came out, and he did it all the way into the 80s. And one of his friends, when E.J. got too old and passed away, one of his friends took over. His name was Tingley, and he was also a New York trapper, and he did it for a few years, and then there was another gentleman that took it over, and then I was the fourth, and I got to be the question box editor in 1984 is when I started doing the question box for Fur Fishing Game. So, and I did it for almost 10 years in my career as a trapper. Before I got on TV and ESPN and all that, I didn't have time when I got to that level. But I still write for the magazine, and it's very, very cool. It's very interesting. It's nice to go full circle.
So basically, people would just send in questions, and then you would reply in the magazine.
A lot of them were trapping-related questions, but there was also gun calibers and a lot of different things. And I had to do quite a bit of research because you don't want to put something in there that was wrong.
Right.
But some of it was objective, questions and, how do you do this or how do you do that? So it was a fun thing. And there's always been a page or two in the magazine of the question and answers.
Now, this is cool. You get the profits of trapping in the Canadian Northwest in here. I'm sure there's going to be so much cool stuff in here. But
oh, yeah, there is. A lot of research went into that.
So what does that mean, the average? Is that for their season, that was their average for the entire haul, or how do
right?
What
so,
are those numbers?
Yeah, so it's basically a chart that goes over a handful of trappers that trapped in that area, and it divides out in the years.
Yep.
And what the whole chart basically stands for is this is how much that they made this year on trapping, and this is how the animals they caught, and this is how much they made the next year, and this is the animals they caught. And what it boils down to is if you catch 100 foxes and they're worth $1 a piece, you make $100. But if you catch 20 foxes and they're worth $5 a piece, you still make $100. So the reality is in trapping, the fur market really controls how much you can make because it's not really, but it's a supply and demand. So when there's lots of foxes, typically the price for foxes would be lower because there's a glut of them, and there's a lot of them, people are trapping them, so the price goes down.
Yep.
But when there's not very many, the price goes up, so supply and demand. And so when you get to a time like in the fur boom years, when a red fox was worth $80 and there were a lot of foxes around, you could make some serious money in the trapping business. And so, but there's always a boom and a bust. There's always a fluctuation of the fur market values, and it's based on supply and demand. And whatever the demand is, sometimes the bobcat coats are, the fur coats are worth so much more, and they're more in demand, so the bobcat prices go way up, and the fox prices maybe go down, or coyote, or raccoon, or any of the fur-bearing animals. So, and it's just interesting to look at. I mean, the moral of the story is, if you can have high fur prices and catch high numbers, you really do well. So it's about the area that you trap. Like, for example, there's a big marsh in Wisconsin called the Horicon Marsh. It's just flooded with muskrats. So when the muskrat prices were real high, the people that lived in and around the Horicon Marsh did really, really well, because they had kind of a little captive audience where the muskrat populations might have been low in other areas to drive the price up. Those Horicon rat trappers made a lot of money because they had so many muskrats around.
So would it be a strategy in trapping too, if there was a down year on the market price for, like, say, muskrats, would they just not trap there and wait and let the population grow and then wait for the good year and then...
Absolutely.
And then trap?
Absolutely. There's no reason to trap them if they're not worth that much. Of course, a muskrat only has like a life cycle of about 4 years, so you're not going to, but they do breed like rats. So at the end of the day, you're going to have, they can build their population back fairly quickly. And the whole thing with trapping is, especially for a trapper that's kind of not running a long road line or a long line system where they're going into many, many, many different areas. If you're trapping around your home base, you never want to trap it out. So you only trap a certain number and then you stop, and that lets have about the same number of animals every year, to come back. Because, for example, a red fox has pups in April, and by October, they're almost adults. And so when they're first prime, they sell just the same as a 2-year or a 3-year-old fox. Yeah. So, the pups can be killed, trapped at, just 5-6 months later, and still be full grown foxes. And then different parts of the country have better quality pelts. When you get out in like the Dakotas where I trapped, the fox pelts were paler because there's not a lot of trees and vegetation. Where you get here in Maryland and in this area where there's a lot of cover, that they don't get a lot of sun on them, so they're more cherry red. And the darker red pelts sometimes would sell better. And the foxes in South Dakota would be a lot bigger. There's a lot more things to eat out there, easier for them to find rodents and whatnot. So the foxes could be, an extra 3 pounds heavier than foxes that you might get in the woods like here.
How about different color phases, like a gray fox versus a red fox? What's the difference when it comes to, are they, what's more in demand?
Well, they're actually a different species. Like the color phases would be, like a silver fox or a white fox, which would be an Arctic fox. Those would be more red foxes that have the color phases, whereas a gray fox is more of a tree climbing fox. It's a smaller bodied fox. It's a totally different animal. And there's times back in the fur days when gray foxes were paying more than reds. It just depends, on what's the supply and what's the demand.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've done some hunting in Anticosti. Have you heard of Anticosti before? Yeah, and up there's the only predator on the island are foxes, and they're everywhere. And they kind of become your buddies when you're hunting up there. They follow you around. They've learned to come to the sound of gunshots. They know there's going to be a gut pile to feed on. Dinner bell. Oh yeah, and they're black, they're calico, and they're red up there. Oh, yeah. So I wonder, a black fox. That seems like you don't see too many of those. But up there's a lot of them. Yeah. And there's a phase that's called the cross fox, which it's more of the calico, what you're talking about. They're kind of silvery black, and if they've still got the red touches on the legs or russet, the really pretty foxes and quite valuable. And foxes were penned up and raised, and there were fox farms, just like there are mink farms, where you could control what they were fed, so the fur got longer and silkier, and when they were harvested. So. And that cut into the trappers market because a big fox ranch could maybe have 10,000 foxes on it,
Whereas a trapper, if he's lucky, he can catch 40 or 50 or maybe 100 if you got a good spot or good area. So I enjoyed trapping. It was real. I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about myself. It is such a hard job because of the amount of work that's involved. Checking the traps, every day, setting new traps, and it's like anything else. I learned so much from trapping that really helped me in my deer hunting when I started to switch over to doing my bow hunts, because I learned that if I set new traps every day, like for example, let's say you have 50 traps that you have set out. So if maybe it takes you a day to set 10 sets. Okay, so there's one day you have 10 sets out. In 5 days, you'd have all 50 of your traps out. But over a course of time, those first few sets that you made, the first 10, they wouldn't be as productive because you would already have caught a few animals there. So you try to take those traps and move them to the end of your trap line, and you're constantly
slingshotting it. Yeah,
and you're constantly trying to make new opportunities in new areas, and that's how you kind of grow. And it's the same thing with deer hunting or trying to set up your tree stands, and understanding, that you want to be in and around where these bucks are moving during the time that you're going to hunt.
Yeah.
And that might be different when you're checking trail cameras now in August, September, October. They move in the rut and they change total areas where they go.
Yeah.
And then they maybe come back around to the deer yard areas when it gets snow on the ground. And so you've got to understand their movements just like you do in the fur bearers.
Yeah.
When you're setting up your stands and whatnot. So it was really a good help for me. And understanding that quantity, having the more traps you had out in quality places, the higher your catch.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with tree stands, If you're only working with 2 or 3 tree stands, you've only really got 2 or 3 places you can go hunt in any given day or weekend. Whereas if you've got 20 sets out, you've got a lot more opportunity to be able to move yourself around into different areas, different bucks, different opportunities.
And you've got to hunt where the deer are. And
Absolutely.
if you want to kill a big buck, you've got to hunt where the big bucks are.
That's
and
right.
Same thing with trapping, like you said. Those first 20 traps or 10 that you had, if you were successful on them, you'd move them to another spot. And Lanny Benoit told me in one of our podcasts that we did that him and his clan would go up, and they're really, really great trackers, and they'd only shoot big bucks over 200 pounds. One season, their clan could take out 7, 8, 200 pounders in an area, so they wouldn't go back there the next year. They'd have to let that regenerate.
Absolutely, yeah.
What have you learned about the cyclical nature of the animals that you're trapping and how they balance against each other? Like, for instance, you hear when there's, the coyote population and the rabbits, they've got if the rabbit population is high, well, the coyote's going to eat good. They're going to eat good that year, and then next year the rabbits are going to be down, and then because the rabbits are down, the coyote population is going to go down. What have you learned about that kind of?
Well, it's all animal populations are cyclic to a degree. There is the animals that browse like deer, or they feed on grasses and leaves and sticks. Those animals are more in tune to not being as cyclic than the animals that eat meat or eat, the animals that look for mice that are dependent. But in dry years, when the vegetation is not as good, so it's not so much dependence upon like a rabbit or, squirrel or ground squirrels or, foxes will eat grasshoppers, they'll eat anything. But it's not really dependent on that for the deer. But if it's a real dry or a real wet, a lot of people will say, and I believe it, that the wetter the spring, the better the antler growth.
Yep.
But it's because you got a lot more fresh twigs and fresh sprouts and fresh things to eat, for the deer. When you get in some of these forests here where you have a lot of pine trees, those are kind of dead areas because, they don't eat pine trees. So they might like rubbing on them.
Yeah, no, they do.
But at the same token, they're not eating them. So finding those areas, around beaver dams and things like that. I mean, some of the best deer hunting lures have beaver castor in it. So a lot of times if you find beaver dams, the deer are attracted to the smell of the beaver castor. So you're going to find, good runways and places in and around areas where you've got beaver. So if you're hunting in a big woods scenario and a couple of big beaver dam areas, set up some trail cameras. You might be surprised what bucks come around.
Yeah, I know a couple of those right near here. Why are they attracted to the beaver castor?
It's just a unique odor, and it's kind of a woodsy odor, but it's really a sweet odor, and all animals are somewhat attracted to it. It's kind of like a skunk too. A skunk. Everybody knows what a skunk smells like, but every time a skunk sprays, other animals are interested in it. They're wondering, why did that skunk spray there? Where is that smell? So, their nose is their number one protection. So they stay close. And in the old days of bow hunting, I shouldn't say old days, but there was a time when people used skunk essence to try to cover your human scent, and also fox urine and other things. People would try to mask the human odor of the tree stand by using cover scents like that.
Yeah.
Since it's always best to just have the wind right.
Right.
And not. I know guys that smoke in a tree stand shoot big bucks, so it's not a question. It's more of a question of right place, right time.
Yeah. You don't think you can fool a whitetail's nose. No matter what cover scent you have on you, they're going to still smell your human odor. So it is the wind that's got to be the most important thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. There were a couple of years where I was really trying to get on the ball on cover scent and putting all my, keeping all my stuff in totes, airtight totes, and then not dress until I got to the field. And that just became such a big pain in the ass. It was, I stopped doing that, and I haven't seen, less bucks or anything. I've still, I've done well. So it's all, I play the wind. It's not you're not going to fool their nose.
I remember I was bow hunting in Africa, and I was in a tree stand, and I was waiting on it to shoot a big kudu, and there was a trail. And I took a rock with my bare hands, and I walked out to the trail, and I put the rock right in the middle of the trail. And it was kind of a lineup for me and the cameraman, because the cameraman was in the tree, and I'd say, you see this rock? It's when the kudu gets to this rock, I'm going to shoot him. Well, we had a kudu come in that was not a smaller one. When he came and I wasn't going to shoot him, but when he got almost to the rock, he stopped, and he bent down, and he smelled that rock. And then he put his head up, and he just looked around, and he kept walking. We had really good winds, so we weren't going to be smelled, but he could smell that I touched that rock. And then the next kudu that came in, the fourth kudu that came in, I shot, but all of them smelled the rock. They all stopped and smelled that rock. Yeah. So it's amazing what these animals' noses can do.
Yeah.
It's just I learned a lot just from that.
Yeah, I forget somebody told me that they did something like that with whitetail. You put something out, just because they're going to stop for a second, give you that shot opportunity because they're curious.
And especially if you're trying to film yourself, where you need them to stop.
Yeah.
You need them to stop. That's why a lot of guys who self-film, they'll use decoys or they'll use something. Try to set up
nice too.
A scrape.
Yeah,
exactly.
A mock scrape. 25 yards from your stand.
I did a TV show with a guy that lives in Iowa, and he would use what's called a horizontal rub. You know what that is?
Yeah, I've seen that.
That's really cool. And he took me out on his area where he deer hunted and showed me all the different horizontal rubs, and he filmed all the deer that came into him. Really nice, big Iowa bucks. He just had a really phenomenal area, and it was amazing. And it was all the sap, the actual horizontal rub that he put in there was a pine tree. That was a real sappy pine tree, and they would try to rub that sap on their antlers, and it was amazing to watch the footage that he had.
Yeah, and he builds them, right? You build kind of like sticks like that, and you lay it across, and it's just like a log.
He would use a wire and wire it to a tree, and then he would do an overhanging branch right there, so there would be an overhanging branch, and so he'd make, and he'd have a little bit of a scrape under it, but then the horizontal, there'd be like two trees, and he would just take that and he'd wire it so it stuck out maybe as long as stick out and then a tree, and it was cool. It was very neat.
Yeah, that's cool. In the trapping world, are you seeing that is there a big decline in the amount of trappers compared to what it used to be? Is there a problem there?
I mean, it comes and goes with the fur prices. When the fur prices are down for a few years, a lot of guys they were only in it for the money, and they step away from it. But when the fur prices are down and there's not as many trappers, what happens is the animal damage complaints go up. So there's really a new cottage industry that's been born in the last 20 years for trappers to actually take skunks from underneath people's houses, trap raccoons. A lot of these new big supermarket places, like Walmart that has groceries and stuff, birds will fly in these big garage doors and get in, and you can't have birds flying over top of the produce section and all that. So there's a lot of trappers that have gotten involved in learning how to net those birds in the middle of the night, and you can make serious money because Walmart wants those, or whatever those big stores are, they want those birds out of there. And then of course bats. There's lots of different animals that trappers can move into this, animal damage control.
Interesting.
It's really, and I know there's several different trappers I know that turned it into really big business where they would hire other trappers and they would put logos on the side of their pickups, and they would they had complaint after complaint after complaint, and you might get $250 to trap one raccoon that keeps getting into one lady's garbage can all the time, and she's just sick and tired of picking up garbage.
Yeah, interesting. Let's go back kind of towards the business aspect of, and because you're a great entrepreneur, and I want, I'm sure a lot of people can learn from you. When you were talking about getting into trapping, in the beginning, and you learn from other people. Who did you learn from? Was it that kid that you took over his trap line?
Absolutely.
When you were
His name was
Did he take
Jeff
you out
Turner.
and teach you?
Well, I followed him around and watched him, and finally, he saw me watching him, and one thing led to another, and I said, well, let me just come along with you, and I'll carry your traps, and that's how I learned. I just basically was was his gopher. Whatever he needed, I would carry the basket, carry the animals, carry the traps, and I would watch him set them. And then eventually, I'd buy a license, and then I could trap too, and then I would set traps with him, and he'd be setting this trap while I'd be over there setting that trap, and we kind of became partners for a couple of years until he got a girlfriend, and then I got the trap line. So yeah, it was a good way to learn, and trapping. One of the things that I did learn about trapping is kind of a camaraderie thing, because in the morning you get up early and then you'd meet your partner out there, and then you walk the railroad tracks and you go down the creek and shine your light to see what you'd caught, that morning. And it's kind of fun when you're doing it with a buddy.
Oh yeah.
And then when you're by yourself, it's a totally different thing. But eventually, I got to the point where I was trapping on my own, you know, and more so than having a partner.
Yep.
And it's because it's such hard work. A lot of guys buddies of mine that I would take along, thinking that they would be my partners. They
can't keep up with the work ethic.
They weren't as interested in it as I was, And you don't start out anything thinking you're going to make a bunch of money, and it wasn't really totally about the money, but I enjoyed doing it so much. I remember my dad telling me that, when I told him I wanted to be a professional trapper, he said, you can't make a career out of a hobby, because you're going to have a career. You have to be a plumber, electrician, or you can go to college. You're going to have to do something. And but I learned that, the more, if I got good enough at trapping that I could write the magazine articles, if I got good enough at trapping to where I could make my own lures, if I got it good enough, like E.J. Daly did, like O.L. Butcher did, like Stanley Hawbacker did. And I eventually did, and then I took it one step further by making the videos. I made how to trap videos, and that was where it got really lucrative for me.
So you had looked at those guys, E.J. Daly and Hawbacker, and you had seen that, there is a way to make a living off of it if you just stick with it, right?
Absolutely. And it wasn't so much just the furs. It wasn't so much. It's like a lot of people would look at me as being a professional bow hunter. But the reality is I was a TV producer that did bow and arrow hunting shows. Mm-hmm. And big game was my specialty, and that's what I did. But I tried to do all aspects of the hunt, like where do you go hunt there? Why do you go hunt there? Which outfitter did you go with? What's the terrain like? How do you hunt these animals? What's their tracks look like? And so the TV shows became stories with these guides telling me, when you're going to hunt a grizzly bear, this is what you do, and this is how I'm doing it, and then these are the tracks. And so you learn, and you put all this knowledge in your back pocket from all these different species. And so that's what I did. I was a TV producer that made bow and arrow hunting shows on big game. And I wasn't a professional bow hunter, because you can't make money just going hunting. You spend money when you go hunting.
Oh, yeah.
So my product was the footage. My product was the show. And so, and whatever equipment I used, because my shows became popular, because they were somewhat interesting. At least I tried to make them as interesting as I could. and that's what I learned from trapping. You have to try to be the best you can be. You have to try to put out the absolute best thing you can do. It might not be as good as Cecil B. DeMille or, any other great producer of movies or whatever, Steven Spielberg, but it's as best that I could do. And I wanted to be better every day. So from the very first TV shows I ever made, or videos even, to the last ones I've made, you can see a dramatic increase every year of the quality, because it came down to the footage for me. It wasn't like I was waiting on that one giant buck to come in or that one buck on trail camera. It was about the footage. Yeah. It was about the pre-roll, which is seeing the animal, because there's 3 shots that you have to get. You have to get the discovery. There he is. There he is. Here he comes. So you get that discovery shot, and then you get the pre-roll, and then finally you get the kill shot, which is what you have to have. And so when you have all that and you make a good shot, which you have to make a good shot because it's a one-shot deal, because you're recording it. Yep. That's where the pressure comes in. And you have to get your chops. I made my fair share of misses and I made my fair share of bad shots. But at the end of the day, I had many more good shots than bad shots. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did.
And you put your bad shots into your shows.
I put my misses in.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And if I make a marginal shot, I say it's a marginal shot. And that comes back to the ethics part of it, A lot of times I'll say good hit, and people will message me and say, that wasn't a good hit, it was a little bit too far back. But when you're shooting a Rage 2-blade extreme, you don't want to shoot them in the shoulder, so you're aiming a little bit farther back, So at the end of the day, it's a good hit for me because I know where the arrow's going to exit, and I know how far they're going to go before they go down. So, and sometimes it's different too, at least I learned, this isn't about trapping, it's about TV producing, but the camera's a different perspective sometimes than what the hunter is, because in every tree set or every blind or whatever you're doing, you can't always get that perfect over the shoulder. You might set up an over the shoulder where the camera's here and you're here, but you need the deer to be in a line with you before you shoot. But the deer comes from over there, the deer comes under your stand and comes over here, and so a lot of times the camera leaves the hunter and goes on to the animal. And you don't realize that perspective is a little bit different than my perspective. So when it looks like I hit a little back on the camera, but I'm aiming for the opposite front leg, and so it's a different perspective. And so a lot of times when a lot of people see the hits on video, they don't understand that because they think my eyes are what they're seeing. What I see is what they're seeing, and it's not. It's what the camera sees. The farther a camera is away from you, the harder it is. Mm-hmm. Because there's more of a perspective difference, and it makes a big difference. So we always would try to get the over the shoulder. We called it the point of view shot.
Yeah. But putting in your misses and being open and honest about it, I just think it's so important because authenticity is everything, and not just with TV production or it's any business, right? How important is authenticity?
It's everything. I mean, it's because it comes back to honesty then, I will say, as a bow hunter, my number one job was to have, entertainment for my audience. But really my number one job was to promote the sport and promote ethics in the sport, And so, you're going to have times where you shoot an animal and maybe it was a little back and maybe it was in the evening and maybe you would be better off not looking for it till the next day. Those types of things you had to kind of work around because you don't want to shed any bad light on, on the hunt or on bow hunting, because that type of information in the wrong hands makes all bow hunters look bad. Well, these guys don't care; they just left it out there to suffer till the next day. That's what would be the perspective of somebody who's a non-hunter. Yeah. So, as a producer, you have to think about what the non-hunter thinks too, and you have to kind of work around that. And yes, it is entertainment. You got to keep that authenticity there, but you also have to have respect for bow hunting and for bow hunters, and you have to put your absolute best foot forward every show, every time. Not too much celebration, because you are actually taking the life of the animal that you're shooting. So too much high fives and fist pumping and and all that is not in the best interest of having an ethical show. Yeah. Even though the emotion's there, and having that emotion is crucial to a successful show, but it can be overdone. And so you have to think a lot about that too. But it is a business, so you're not gonna. You have to think about what's your public persona. What do people think of you in public? You're not going to have everybody's not going to love you in your business. Like everybody doesn't love Sara Lee chocolate cake either, but they still sell it. So it comes down to having somewhat thick skin for the people that think, oh, that guy, I don't really like him. Maybe it's your voice, maybe it's your looks, maybe it's the way you hunt, maybe it's the way you do your show.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different reasons why people may or may not like you, but the cream always rises to the top. So there's, you're going to have your fan base, and the bigger your fan base, the better your ratings, and the better your ratings, the longer you're going to be around. And to be on TV for 35 years, you got to have your chops. You got to have more people like you than not like you.
Yeah. And I think that goes to, authenticity just breeds longevity, because if you're inauthentic on camera, if you're not who you are in front of the camera and you're not that same person off the camera, you're not authentic. But I think people can see that pretty quickly, and they can sniff it out. And everybody watching this will know a couple people that they'll see on camera and just go, I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important.
Yeah, and I think the people that are the most authentic are sincere people. So when they talk to you, you can't help but believe them, because they seem so sincere that they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. They're not trying to make a fast one or whatever. And it is an expensive business to be in, and that there's a lot of money to be made if it's done correctly. And so, a lot of times when it's too dark, I wouldn't take the shot because the footage wouldn't be there, even though it would be a big deer, or whatever animal you're after. And it's frustrating because a lot of times the biggest ones come in later, which is why I don't have a huge number of giant bucks on my wall. But I have the footage of all the ones that are on my wall, good footage, And that's what it was all about to me, to get that, to share that experience with people that are out there. And the average hunter isn't shooting a giant buck every year, maybe once in his lifetime. So the opportunities that I had to shoot a big caribou or shoot a big...
Look at that list right there, 3-pointers and spike horns everywhere.
The average guy, that's what he's going to get. So it can be, your show can be overly unrealistic.
Yeah.
When you start putting on this, I have to shoot a 180, to make my TV shows with. And I mean, it's great for the, like the Drury guys always shoot big deer. They have a lot of property. They watch their property. They scout. You look at the Lakoskis. They have a lot of property that's leased, and they're very particular about the deer they shoot. But they live right there, so they can go hunting every day. If you're going to get on a jet and fly somewhere, and you have a week or 10 days to make a TV show,
Yep.
You're not there every day waiting on the big one.
What do you want from your trail cameras? I know what I want. You basically just want to make sure that if a buck walks in front of it, the camera is capturing it, plain and simple, right? And with cell cameras, you want to make sure that after it captures it, it's getting sent to you, and it's not getting hung up somewhere, and you don't have to worry about, oh, did you format the SD card the right way, or did you use the right SIM card with the right cellular network, or what did you do that is making this image get caught up? With Moultrie Mobile, you don't have to worry about that. I've been using Moultrie Mobile cell cams for 5 years now. The ones that I bought 5 years ago are still working. They're outdated now, but they're still working. But this year I'm running 20 Moultrie Edge 2 Pro cell cams. And I know when I put that into a tree, it is giving me the confidence that it's working. And there's brands out there where you just don't know, and you don't have the confidence when it's up in a tree, and then you have to talk to customer service, and you have to go through a whole line of troubleshooting items. With the Moultrie mobile cameras, they make it super simple. They have an auto connect feature, which will find the strongest cell signal around from the 4 major networks and automatically connect to that, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to install a SIM card. You don't have to bring an SD card and format it. Everything is built into the camera. The technology is all built into it. And that leads to a reliable camera that I can be confident in. And if you guys are looking for the right cell cam, if you already run cell cameras, you run different brands, I recommend getting a couple of these Moultrie Edge 2 Pros or any of the Edge 2 cell cams in that series, and just give them a shot. Run them against the other cameras that you have, and you will you'll be happy with the results. So go check them out. Don't just capture images, gather intelligence with the Moultrie Mobile Edge 2 camera series paired with the super simple and easy to use Moultrie Mobile app. You can learn more at moultrieproducts.com. Vortex Optics has sponsored the podcast. I have been a user of Vortex my entire bow hunting career. I've used their Diamondback 10x42 binoculars. I've used their laser rangefinder. And when I went out to North Dakota, I used a spotting scope out there, one of their angled spotting scopes to spot game far away. And Vortex is just a great company. I've obviously gotten to know them at Huntstock over the past few years. And they've got great customer service, an awesome warranty program, and really good optics that don't break the bank. So if you guys are in need of any binoculars, scopes, they've got, red dots and other optics for rifles and gun hunting, or, binos, rangefinders, spotting scopes, tripods. You cannot go wrong with Vortex. So visit www.vortexoptics.com.
Let's talk about a little bit about your business, if you don't mind, and how it's changed over the years. And, so going back to the first, obviously when you're trapping, you're making some money off of the furs and everything there. But then you started filming, and you put out, what was it, VHSs at the time?
Yeah,
and was
VHS videos.
That kind of the first? Well, you were also selling trapping your lures, but what was it like? How many of those VHS did you sell in the early days?
It was incredible, because what happened was a company called Blockbuster Video came along, and they would have every different kind of movie in it. And I ended up meeting a distributor, a VHS video distributor, and of course I had some of the very only trapping videos back then. This is in the mid to late 80s, and he was able to take those videos and get them into all these mom and pop stores and Blockbuster, where you could go in on a Friday and rent the video and bring it back on a Monday, So you got to have it the whole weekend. It was like I was selling my advertising, because these videos were all about me running my traps. This is how you make the sets. This is how you dispatch the animals. This is how you skin them and stretch them. I made quite a few of these videos, and people that watched those videos went out and caught their first fox or their first coyote or first mink or first muskrat or first, raccoon. They caught those after watching my videos. And maybe they hadn't caught one before. Maybe they had only caught a couple. But then when they watched my videos, they caught a lot more because of what I was teaching on the videos. And so then they started buying my lures and buying my books. And if I came out with a new video, they bought it. And so it turned into a little cottage industry. And I had a group of so many people that were buying my stuff every year. And it actually turned into very lucrative business,
Was that kind of the first time where you're like, all right, now, this is going to be the career, or were you already there when you were just doing the lures before the videos, where you're like, hey, this is the career for life?
Well, you're always looking for that one, hook, that one product that everybody has to have, and the videos really worked well for me because people got something out of it. It was a learning experience for them. And so and it's even true to this day. I mean, so many people will come up to me and, I bought your trapping videos back in the day. And, they followed me on TV with the bow hunting and all the rest of it. But I helped them to learn something that they didn't know how to do. And they experienced some of the things that I taught them on the videos, and they were really appreciative of that, and it's something that stuck with them for years. That's why this Master Trappers book, when I wrote it, there's a lot of trappers that aren't in this book, and so I had some pushback early on when I finished it and put it out, because why isn't this trapper in it, or why isn't that trapper? Because he's a really good trapper. But I'm honoring the Master Trappers for me. These are my Master Trappers. These are the people that I bought their books when I was a kid. I read their articles in the magazines. I went and took lessons from these people. These are the people that I looked up to.
Yep.
The other people, it's just that I never met them. I didn't buy their book for one reason or another. It has nothing to do with how good a trapper they were or anything. So, it was my way to give back to all the trappers that I learned from. A lot of them are deceased from way back in the day, you know. A lot of them are still alive. In fact, you know, the biographies that I did of the people that were alive when I did the book and during COVID, 2020, 21, 4 of them now are passed away that were alive when that book came out. So, you know, someday I'm going to be gone. So some of these materials are, you know, my legacy moving forward.
Yeah.
And it was you know, I've had a good run, and if I can teach, if I've always looked at any book that I bought, if I could just learn one trick, one thing that I didn't know before, it was worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it to get that.
Exactly.
And this is a motivational book. It's for all the guys who remember all these other people, the Hallbackers and Dailies and all them, for them to flash back when they trapped in the fur boom in the 70s, you know, or 1978 to 1982 was a big fur boom. When they remember that, but then they quit trapping, and then all of a sudden now they buy the book and they look back and they go, "Oh my gosh, was that the time of my life?" You know, that was the heyday. That was when foxes were $80. That's when bobcats were $250. You know, I remember picking up raccoons off the road and skinning them and selling them to pelts. You know, because they were worth money, and people remember that, and that's what the book was for, and that's why it was so well received, and it was just a pleasure to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how you can be a mentor without having to be right in front of somebody. Like those guys that you read their books, they were your mentors through the books and through the classes, and then when you put those VHS tapes out, you mentored.
I was on their TV screen, even though it was a video.
100,000 people, or however many people bought the thing, you were mentoring them just through that video, and that's cool. That has real impact.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it's still to this day. People remember the trapping days. All the ESPN shows, all the TV shows I made, all the big game hunting videos I've done or DVDs now, YouTube, whatever, they remember the trapping.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because that's your roots, you know. And I do want to go full circle. I do want to run a trap line again. I do want to go all the way back around. So that's why I'm going to come up to Maine and do some marten and fisher trapping this winter, because I've never done it before.
You already know where you're going to be going?
Yeah, there's a trapper that has a cabin up there and a place, so I'm going to go stay with him. And one of my buddies who was actually a student of mine way back in the day, I used to teach at this trappers college. He was one of my students. He's a big beaver trapper in Texas, and he's going to go with me. So we're going to have old laughs and, you know, just a couple of old codgers now running around up in the woods. But it'll be cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. Well, and then you went to your bow hunting show and the DVDs that you've done on the Super Slams, and sold quite a few of those, I'd imagine. But now, like, where have you seen the industry has gone? You know, it's just totally different than the TV days. Like, TV is on its way, you know, definitely down, right? And things are getting fragmented, and there's YouTube, and there's all kinds of outdoors channels now on different kinds of streaming services, and Roku has one, and this one has, you know what I mean? It's so fragmented that it just must be such a huge change. So what have you noticed about that?
Yeah, it's very different now. You know, you always want any business that you would start, any business that you would do, you want multiple income streams. You know, you have to have multiple income streams.
In case one of those spigots gets turned
off, you got to replace it quickly. You know, and so that's crucial. But when I got on TV, it was destination viewing. You know, the shows were only aired once. They aired once a week at a certain time. If you didn't watch it then, there was no DVR. You missed it. You know, so it was destination viewing. If you want to watch I Dream of Jeannie, you got to watch I Dream of Jeannie when she comes on, right? You know, now it's in syndication and it's all over the place, and you can watch the old shows and whatever. But, you know, now it's all this entertainment is on demand for whenever you want. You turn on your computer, or you go to your phone and you go to YouTube, and you just, all of a sudden you're flooded with swipe after swipe after swipe of video. And there's these algorithms now that, oh, well, you stopped and listened to that Fleetwood Mac song, you know, now we're gonna put 10 more Fleetwood Mac songs in your scroll, and it's basically developing, you know, your style of what you're looking for, and it's feeding it to you. It's all like a big animal, you know, right there. It's coming and pushing it on you. Yeah. So it's different. But in the business world, it's very, very different too, because now how do you make an impact? You know, who is your audience? Because audiences before, you know, we always looked at when on TV, for example, we would always look at the 18 to 54 age category.
Yeah.
If you had a huge audience in that category, the ones before 18 you really didn't care about, and the ones after 54.
Yep.
And it was because those were the income earning years, where people had disposable income, and that's what your sponsors are looking for.
And that was the same thing on radio too. That's the big demographic that all the ratings were based off of. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, now, you got people like, for example, a buddy of mine, Tim Wells, who does really, really well on social media, has a huge Facebook following and huge YouTube channel, actually several. He caters a little bit more to the younger guys, the younger people who really understand that. So he does well with his blowguns and his spearing stuff, and so he's deviated away from the traditional bow hunting stuff so much, even though he has a lot of, and he enjoys that the most, and he has a lot of that. But he's kind of reinvented himself to be able to adapt to the industry, which is what's happened, and you have to reinvent yourself, even if you're a plumber or a carpenter or a shoemaker. You've got to reinvent yourself so many times in your career just to keep up with the changes and what goes on, whether it's technology changes or tastes that people have, or fads that come along. The laws change too in the hunting side of it. In some areas you can't hunt anymore. Like I've got some great grizzly bear hunts, but you can't even hunt there anymore. It's illegal to hunt grizzly bear in that province in Canada, British Columbia. So, I almost have to put disclaimers on all those because people think I poached bears, because they don't realize those hunts are older that are being, it looks like I, could have just did it, He's hunting illegally, so you have to be careful. But you're always looking for those buckets. Yeah. You're always looking for ways. Probably the biggest thing besides that's changed is how the sponsorships work. How you actually get the money.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that aren't involved in the industry, they look at it more as selling yourself out. Like if you get a sponsor to use a certain kind of bow, that you basically are selling yourself out to that company, and you're going to promote that bow only because they're paying you.
Even if you wouldn't shoot it,
right? Only because they're paying you. And I imagine that there is times in anybody's television career, or any time that they're trying to make money in the industry, where they have to kind of say, well, I probably wouldn't use this, but this guy's willing to pay me for the advertising, I'm going to do it. But I think everybody who's very successful over the long haul really gets to pick and choose what sponsors they have, and they have. If you have good ethics and you're authentic and sincere about what you're doing, you're only going to use products and sponsors that people that you believe in, that you want to use. You know? And that's what I've been able to do. I mean, I've had Realtree as a sponsor since 1989. I have Realtree on my hat now. I mean, Realtree has been very good to me, and I've been very good to them. It's been really a win-win relationship, And the longer that you can keep your sponsors happy, the better, because typically you can't keep a sponsor 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's unheard of. How many years you've been with Realtree? 40? I mean, that's unheard of.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was telling you, when I worked at Spartan Race for many years, and I learned that there's many ways to make a sponsorship deal, and there's some thought that, hey, let's get this big sponsor. They've got big budgets. Let's get the highest price possible in year one and do this giant deal. And then what you find out is you get 6 months through year one, and now you're just starting to click with that sponsor, and everything's starting to match up, and you're starting to figure out how to work together. But guess what? Now you're only 2 months away from having to figure out if they're going to renew next year. So that first 6 months, could have been a little rocky. You guys are trying to it's just like a marriage or a relationship. You're feeling each other out, and then you just start getting clicking, and then there's a clock ticking down. Hey, we got to figure out if you guys are coming back by next year in a month. And so it rushes everything, and it sets that up immediately for failure and a non-renewal on a sponsorship. So I would always try to do the opposite and, come in at, 25% of what that real high level is in year one, so that you can take your time. There's less pressure because there's less things to activate in that sponsorship deal. You're not up against a clock. It's like you're dipping your toe in. And then you get to know them, and they realize that you really have their best interest in mind, and that turns into longevity. And that's because I was being authentic and who I am making a business deal. You never want to make a business deal that is going to be lopsided. That's going to ruin your credibility, and it's going to ruin your income down the line too, because all of those deals that end up being long term, it's infinitely harder to find a replacement sponsor. Say, you lost Matthews or something, right? To replace and get somebody else in, at least in that industry that I was in, would take 2 years to find a sponsor to fill that hole. So is it really worth it to make a deal early on just to get a commission check that is not going to renew, and then it's going to take you 3 years to get somebody to fill that sponsorship gap? Or is it better to be authentic and build it slowly and then set yourself up for a long term?
Absolutely. And the thing is, too, a lot of people don't really maybe think it through. A lot of viewers, when they see sponsors and billboards and commercials running and people holding up their bow and showing their logos or their arrows or showing the camo they're wearing or whatever, they look at it as blatant advertising and it turns them off. But the reality is, any business that you would have as an entrepreneur, you're going to do something like that. If you're a cabinet maker, you're going to have different styles of cabinets that are easier to make, that are you make more profit on, and you're going to push those to the client more than you would the more detailed and more expensive cabinets that you don't make as much profit on. And you probably have a deal with the company that makes the knobs, and you probably have a place for people to go get the appliances where you get a commission from them if you send them to get the best appliances, like their refrigerators and stoves and everything. And you start looking at that business, and that's just buckets for this cabinet maker. He doesn't just make money making cabinets. He makes money on the knobs. He makes money on whichever kind of cabinet you get, all the way down the line. And so it's not any different than that, or an electrician, or a person that builds houses, or you could go on to many, many different types of occupations that you could have, that you do the exact same thing that we do as a TV producers. We call them sponsors, but I mean, that really is not true. I mean, what they really are partners. They're basically partners in the business. They're helping us get the shows put out there because they're paying us, and we're helping them by getting their name out there in the advertising part.
Exactly.
So that's, if people would understand that, I think they would understand a little bit better of how it works. It's like mine. A lot of people thought, well, he's on ESPN. They must pay for all of his hunts. No, they didn't pay for any of my hunts. And I learned early on that if I go to an outfitter that gives me a free hunt, and then I make a bad shot or I don't get anything, he's got all this expense, and he doesn't get any advertising for it. So I learned early on in my career when I was on ESPN to pay for all my hunts. And then that way, if I went to a place that was not a good place to go, I didn't have to advertise for this person because I paid for my deal. Mm-hmm. And then if I did do well and I got a great show out of it, I would turn around and give the guy all this advertising, because he would, he would be on the show talking about his place and the rest of it. And those guys would sell hunts from it. And I would always get invited back. I didn't do a lot of repeat places because I was always looking for another place. My motto was go somewhere I'd never been, hunt an animal I'd never seen. So I was constantly moving around trying to build my resume of bow hunting to add the species together to get more and more species.
That's all interesting stuff, and you have to remain authentic. You got to put together good business deals. You got to treat everybody with respect. You've got to you want to have long-term relationships. That's my whole mindset with Huntstock too. Is I'm talking to a lot of these big brands, and as you mentioned, sponsorship deals have changed big time. And even going to events, a lot of brands were pulling out of coming from events, and some of these sponsors at Huntstock haven't been to the Northeast in decades. They pulled all their Northeastern shows because they didn't like them for one reason or another, and they're coming back now. And some of the first sponsors, it was the hardest thing because I was only pitching them the dream of what I envisioned Huntstock being. There wasn't a formula for it. We didn't have any videos or literature or anything about it because it hadn't happened yet. It was the first event. So I had to convince people, just believe in it, because you're going to see if it comes together the way that I think, and it's going to be partly because you believed in it and you came and you're bringing some big brands back to the Northeast. I had to kind of sell it to everybody as a dream,
right.
And enough people believed in it that first year was really successful, and now it's starting.
Thank goodness.
It's starting to pick up, and I can't wait for you to see it. And once this comes out, we'll already be after Huntstock, but It's just, I think that's the key to everything. And some of those big brands that believed in it, they came to Huntstock and they sold $40,000 worth of stuff, and at a show that has 3,000 people, much smaller than a lot of other shows, and it was worth it for them. And I didn't overprice sponsorship, the vendor, exhibitor rates or anything like that. I've got a good understanding of, here's the value, and you're going to get much more out of it, than what it costs. I mean, I probably could double the sponsorship rates, but I'm not going to do that. I want to keep the sponsors coming back and happy year after year, because that's the longevity for Huntstock. Huntstock, we're not going to make money on it for many years, enough money to really be sustainable living for many years, but you got to look 10 years down the road on everything that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you got to have goals, little goals lead to bigger goals. You don't eat a whole elephant. You eat one bite at a time, So you have to look at any entrepreneurial endeavor that way. The first couple of years you lose money, I mean, I lost money when I was on ESPN 3 years in a row. I mean, I was basically up to here in debt.
Yep.
But eventually I worked my way out of it,
Yep.
And I mean, in between all the years of delivering pizzas for Domino's or sealing blacktop or roofing houses or all the other stuff that I did just so that I could get to that dream of, being an entrepreneur and being a trapper, or when I got to the TV thing, staying there, getting there, even though it's hard, it's a lot easier getting there than it is staying there. And I think you talk to any major league player, any professional football player, and I've talked to lots of them, actually getting drafted and getting onto the team wasn't near as hard as staying there, because everybody wants your job. If you're a baseball player, there's 9 positions and you're one of them, so they can replace you at any time. If you go in a batting slump, you might be sent down and you lose your spot, and then you got to start all over, work your way back. It's not easy. Same thing with the network. You're on a network. What happens if the network says, your show's not rating and we're going to fill your spot with somebody else? I mean, you're out. You're out the door, and then where are you going to go? And the thing with TV too is, like, especially, one of the most important things for me, like, because of wearing Realtree for 35 years, I mean, at the end of the day, all my footage is in Realtree for all of the years. So it wouldn't make sense for me to wear, all of a sudden start wearing Mossy Oak halfway through my career. What the heck's that all about? And I was blessed enough to be able to not only be good friends with Bill Jordan because of, but to have a relationship where they felt like it was really good for them for me wearing their stuff. And I felt really honored to be able to wear it. And that's the type of relationships that you want to have. Mm-hmm. Something that's not only a win-win, but I mean, there's a true feeling of friendship. There's a true feeling of, this guy would do anything for me, and they would do anything for me, that type of thing. And I think that's huge. And it's really important. A lot of people do talk to me about why I only bow hunt, and I think, think about it. Okay, Tim Wells will use a spear, he can do something that's a little harder, okay? But at the end of the day, what harder thing is there bow hunting wise than to hunting wise than to bow hunt? If I were to start using a gun, it would be like cheating. Now, like Jim Shockey, for example, a good friend of mine, he can shoot the muzzle loader all day long, and if he switches to a bow, everybody's like, "Oh, that's cool." That's cool. Jim Shockey shooting a bow now. Well, that's because it's harder than what he used to do. It's not easier.
Yeah.
If you go the other way to the easier, if I bought me one of those 500-yard rifles and I could just shoot the elk from the truck, up on the mountainside, that's not even close to as much difficulty as, you still got to be a good shot. Don't get me wrong. I'm not down in that stuff. But for somebody like me who's bow hunted for so long, and it's not just that perception, it's the fact that that's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy that full draw. I enjoy the adrenaline. Just because the animal's in range, you can let them get too close, and then you can't get drawn back, or you get does around you, and then you're just, even if your shooter buck's out there, if you can't get to this, and this is a lot of movement, unless you've got a really good set, you can't get away with it. And so it's much more difficult, not only to actually make good shots, but just to get drawn back. And so it's the challenge. I love that challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's circumstantial. It's based on where you're hunting and things like that too. Like, because up here with tracking being so ingrained into the culture in these northern states, you know, it's hard to get on a track and track. You know, it's not like being out west where you can see 400 yards and shoot an elk. You know, that is, you know, I don't think anybody can argue that's easier than getting in bow range of an elk and killing one out west with a bow.
Right.
But up here, you know, it is really difficult and it's a challenge. I think it's based on where you hunt, the style that you hunt. Like for me, since I've become a bow hunter the last 5-6 years, really just bow hunting most of the time, I get done with a full bow season. Last year I went the whole season without shooting an arrow for the first time, without releasing one. I passed 30-40 bucks, and I was just waiting for the one that there were a few that I really wanted, and I was waiting, and I passed a bunch. I never shot an arrow, and I was excited to get when gun season started in Massachusetts because I hadn't hunted gun season in a while. But when I picked up that gun and went out, still hunting that first day, it did feel to me, I was like, ooh, this feels like a major advantage now. I'm excited. It feels like you're cheating a little bit because you're so used to bow hunting. So I get that part of it for sure. But I haven't done much tracking. I want to go and do it, and I know that would be just as much of a challenge, and it would be a different type of challenge as killing a deer within bow range in the Northeast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's people hunt for all different kinds of reasons, and you have to adapt to your surroundings. You got to adapt to what's there.
Right.
And you do want to be successful. I mean, you don't make very many TV shows with tag sandwiches, you know what I mean? So you have to, I call them do-overs, whenever you go on a trip and you don't shoot out, you have a do-over because you have to produce so many shows as part of your contract, as part of what you do, and it was, a lot of people would say, it's like, why did you turn your hobby into your career? Doesn't that just ruin it? Well, no, it made me good at it, and I suggest to everybody to get passionate about what you're doing, and if you're passionate about it, you're going to do it to the nth degree. If you're passionate about it, it's going to be as good as it can be, and I think that's important. I think that's how you get to the level that you need to be at. Nobody would ever. When I was in high school, I never dreamed that my career would turn out the way it did. I had a totally different path. But if you're not afraid to go through those doors, if you're not afraid to reinvent yourself, if you're not afraid to challenge yourself, when you got a cameraman rolling and you've been in a tree for 6 days waiting on a deer, and finally the deer comes in, and you've got to execute. It's like it's the last shot of the 3D tournament, and it's you and this other guy's tied. Who's going to shoot the 10 ring?
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure there, and you've got to learn to manage that pressure to get it done and be successful. Otherwise, it's a do-over.
And you have to not be afraid to humble yourself too.
Absolutely.
This past season, like I said, the first day I got down 60 days in a row bow hunting pretty much every day. So I'm in bow hunting mode. All the processes you have to go through and the muscle memories and everything, I was in bow hunting mode. Gun season came around. I carry a muzzleloader during gun season instead of a shotgun. And, I'm still completely in bow mode. But that first day, I still hunted up to a big 10-pointer that just crested the ridge in front of me. I'd seen a doe down, and she was looking over her shoulder. And I was like, she was just coming over the side of the ridge, but she was stopped eyeing me, looking behind her. I'm like, oh, there's going to be a buck up there. Anyway, a big buck crested the ridge, and I was still in bow hunting mode. But when he crested the ridge, she blew. He turned and looked at her. All I had was his neck shot and nothing else. I put it right on his neck and dropped him. And in bow mode, I wasn't thinking, shit, I got to reload right now. I just was rusty with, I hadn't gun hunted in a long time. I was just rusty. Of course, I know to reload your muzzleloader and do it quick, but I had a big fumble because I was still in archery mode, and it took me 3-4 minutes to reload my muzzleloader, and that buck gave me plenty of opportunity to shoot him again because he didn't die. It stunned him temporarily, but I missed all the vitals. He was temporarily stunned up there, but he gave me all these opportunities, and a lot of people wouldn't put that in their videos, but I was putting that in my video. I'm not afraid to make fun of myself, and also it's a teaching moment for people. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people enjoyed the fact that I left that in there. I got a lot of comments like, hey, it's important to show your misses and your mishaps.
Absolutely. That's where the authenticity comes in, because everybody misses no matter what.
Yeah.
There's, I've read some bow hunting books where, the 29 shots, 29 arrows, super slam.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's like, doesn't happen that way.
No.
You know, it just doesn't. You've got to have the misses. You've got to have the dry runs. I had to go on for my Super Slam and North American Big Game to film them all. I had to go on 54 separate hunts to get 29. You know, and so you start doing the math. That's a lot of do-overs. That's a lot of do-overs. Yeah. And you know, it's not just me traveling; it's the cameraman going with me. You know, so you've got 2 airline tickets. You've got your gear. You know, a lot of the outfitters, you know, that you go, you have to have extra space, extra tent for the other guy. I mean, on and on and on. So we need a generator to charge batteries on the mountain using those big cameras. I mean, on and on and on. So it takes a lot of planning and effort to pull it all together. And it's why there's no other Slam DVD sets out there, you know, because people just really haven't. They've left, you know, had to leave their cameraman behind to get that last shot, you know, or they just gave up on themselves. So yeah, you know, you don't want to give up, and that's huge. You know, sticking with your game plan, I think, is nothing wrong with changing a little bit of direction, going through in a different door, but keeping that game plan together and trying to push it all the way to the end. Yep. And there's nothing so more satisfying, really, than accomplishing a goal that took a lot of mini goals. You know, if you need 29 animals and they all have to be on video, that's 29 mini goals. And sometimes you go and you don't get one, so you got to go do it again. That's another, you know, it's just more and more and more work, more and more experience. And you just learn so much from each time you go out. It just gives you a huge portfolio of knowledge.
Yep. Yeah, you learn from your mistakes. Like after I had that miss, and I took forever on the reload. You know, 2 days later I was hunting, and all I was thinking about those last 2 days was how I blew that opportunity on that deer. And I knew if I get another opportunity to shoot this muzzleloader at a deer, I'm reloading as fast as I can. And that ended up happening. I got it on film. I was a nice buck came in. I shot him, and I did not take my eye off of him. He went up. I watched him bed. I was reloading as fast as I could. I was ready for all the follow-up shots. He ended up standing up out of his bed wobbling. I gave him another follow-up shot, and it was because I learned from that mistake and you know, wasn't going to let that happen again. I wasn't going to let the opportunity go by. And I don't know, talking about learning from your mishaps and teaching opportunities and teaching moments, do you want to talk about the Joe Rogan story?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can talk about the Joe Rogan story.
Because I mean, it's pretty. It sucks that it happened, but I mean, this is definitely a teaching moment for some people.
Absolutely. So, you know, even Tom Miranda can make dumb mistakes, and so out of the clear blue, so I get this email, and it's from Joe Rogan's contacts, and it's. Actually, it's signed. The letter's signed. The producer of Joe Rogan Experience, and it goes through. Hey, Mr. Miranda, we're very interested in having you on the podcast. We're really excited about it. The same day, I get this email, which is like I'm like, wow, you know, why would he want me on there? One of my buddies called me and they say, hey man, did you know Rogan mentioned you on a podcast with Remy Warren? They were talking about you going out and collecting all these animals and stuff. And I go, really? I go, you're not going to believe this, but I got an email from the producer of it saying that they want me to be on the podcast. Anyway, long story short, it was a scam. It was a total scam. I was trapped by the scam, literally. Yeah. And yeah, I made a huge mistake. It cost me dearly, because they were able to get into my computer. They were able to, through a Zoom call, get into my computer and take what they wanted to take, and it really wasn't fair.
But it was very elaborate how they did it.
Very elaborate.
They knew everything about you. They must listen to every Joe Rogan podcast, and whenever somebody gets brought up on there, they run this scam. They go, hey, you were brought up. Joe would like to have you on the podcast. Well,
and the thing is the reality is that, you know, that's such another level to be on the Joe Rogan Experience, about somebody who, you know, you look up to and you listen to get the opportunity to do it was just like, oh my gosh, you know, this is going to be just as a one-shot deal. You know, I've been on a lot of different podcasts, and but that would be, you know, really a highlight one for me. And anyway, yeah, it's like, but you start to look back at how it all transpired. It was really elaborate. I mean, I emailed with this guy for a week, and before I finally did the Zoom call with him, and I just had no idea. And even to this day, it's like I look back how stupid I could have been, and I wanted that. I wanted to be on the Joe Rogan Experience more than really think about what was happening and triple and quadruple check it. And it really cost me. So anybody offers you something that seems too good to be true, it probably is. And even for me, it was an experience. And maybe one day I'll get a chance to be on the Joe Rogan podcast. But I'll be scared to death if they send me an email first. That's for sure.
Well, Joe hates scammers, and he's I listen to it a lot. He talks a lot about Russian bot pages and all these pages that are spreading disinformation and stuff. So maybe he'll hear this, but the scam at the end was they asked you to get into your Facebook Live, because when you were going to be going on the Joe Rogan Experience, they're like, you have 1.5 million followers on your Facebook page. We should simulcast live it from your page, and that's what Joe would like to do. So you gave him the access to whatever little widget they had to put on the back end of your Facebook page, and now they stole your page. And
so anyway,
they're posting porn on it, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing. They can't find it. But I mean, I've got Meta looking for it, and I paid a company to try to get it back. But yeah, it was a huge mistake. I mean, I had monetized the page. It was another bucket for me, and and I enjoyed my fans, and I had a lot of them on there, and it is what it is, but it's my fault, I mean, it's a totally look in the mirror thing, I wanted, because it seemed so good, I felt like it was going to be such a huge boon for me, and it was just totally the opposite, so it was really, I really dejected. And the second I went back to post on my page and it was gone, I realized that I had been scammed. I realized they got me, so.
Well, I hope you get it back.
Well, I hope so too. I'd really like to get it back. I mean, I've put a lot of effort in that for a lot of years. I mean, it's not easy to build over 1 million followers, and a lot of people looked forward. I had videos on there with 34 million plus views, lots of them. So at the end of the day, I had a lot of people watching my stuff. But you just it's like missing the desert sheep, $60,000 hunt, you shoot over his back and you're done, You got to do it again. So, that's what you do. You just pick up and go on. You can't let it get to you too bad. But if Joe Rogan, if you're out there listening, they're using your name to scam people, and it's just kind of crappy.
I wonder if he's heard that before from other guests, because it seems like this must be a scheme that they're running. They've done it enough times that it was so elaborate.
Trapped me.
Yeah. I mean, well, I hope you get it back. I like to think about the world in a positive light.
Absolutely.
And have some faith in the world that I don't see a world where they can't get that back for you. You know what I mean?
I was Meta verified. I had, it was one of the more popular pages. So at the end of the day, you'd think it would be a no-brainer. But I still have to prove it was mine, and they could be doing anything. They could delete it all. I mean, I could be losing 100,000 fans a day, off of it. It could be dropping off because it's been gone, for a couple of weeks now. So. Yeah, who knows what I'm going to end up getting back? You don't know. Maybe I won't want it when I get it back.
Yes, all your fans are gone, and they're all bots from India. That would suck.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this book too here. While we got both your books here, The Adventure Bow Hunter. Your quest for the Super Slam, and if it's anything like that book is super interesting. I can't wait to read it. What's unique about this book?
Well, it documents my Super Slam in book form because I have the video. So it's one of the very few hunting video sets that you can get a book to go with it that really explains and shows all the pictures. And well, when I originally made the DVD set, I made it 5 discs long, and it was just too long. And so we in my studio we cut it down to 3 discs. So it's still very, very long. But I decided to take what I didn't have. What I took out in the DVDs and put it in the book form. So that's why I did the book. And it's very, very popular. And I guess the coolest thing, at the very end of each chapter, I kept really good records when I did my slam.
Oh, yeah.
So I have, here's pronghorn. It says
stats.
I have the stats. And so it says the year that I hunted, what year, what month and year it was, the animal, where I hunted it, and how far the shot was, how far the animal ran,
Even how much the hunt cost you.
how much the hunt cost. So you can go through the whole book, 29 hunts, and see all the stats from all the hunts of what camo I was wearing, what bow I was using, and there's some clips. These are actual screen grabs from the video showing the animal coming in and the blind I was in, and hero shot afterwards. You can see I used a golden eagle bow in that hunt. The earlier hunts, I used different bows until I got sponsored by Matthews. So yeah, it's an interesting book and was a fun book to do. Has a little bit of a biography in it at the beginning, and has a little bit of history about the Super Slam in it. So
Well, I'm a stat nerd. I mean, I love. I told you I was a big baseball card collector, and so I love stats, and you probably love stats from baseball too.
absolutely,
Absolutely.
like Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. That's my stat.
Yeah, he should be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yep, he should be. Speaking of baseball, Ken Griffey Jr. was my favorite player growing up. I mean, I idolized him. And you did something special with him, didn't you?
Yeah, when I was doing the Adventure Show on ESPN, we did some.
Turn my cap backwards.
Yeah, there you go.
For Griffey.
We did a father-son pheasant hunt in South Dakota, and Ken Griffey Jr. and Sr. came to South Dakota, hunted pheasants with me and my father, and then Jimmy Houston and his son Jamie Houston. So there were three father-son teams, and we went out and pheasant hunted in South Dakota, big bird hunting area. An area where I ran my trap line back in the day. So yeah, it was a fun deal. And when I was there, he invited me to come to Seattle and do batting lessons. And so I went to Seattle and did batting instruction with Jay Buhner, which was a teammate of his, and Ken Griffey Jr. And so I got to spend. And they played the Yankees in the Kingdome, and I got to be in the dugout, and I got to meet a lot of different Yankees players.
Randy Johnson, was he there at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those guys. And it
Joey
was,
Cora.
I made a TV show on it for ESPN. It was really, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, you know how to swing a bat too.
Yeah.
You were a good baseball player.
I never did
yourself.
hit one out. I hit the wall a couple times in batting practice when I got to hit.
How old were you at that time?
I think I was probably 40,
Yeah.
maybe at 38, something like that.
Yeah.
I was 34 when I got on ESPN, so about 30. I'd say. Well, I think I did that show in '95, so 37.
Just loved Griffey, so that's cool. Did you keep in touch with him at all throughout the years, or
You
how
know,
many of these guys?
they're so busy.
Yeah.
They're so busy. I got signed ball from him and a signed bat from him, and Buhner and those guys. And I got my own uniform. They gave me my own uniform. They gave me a home and away uniform, which I still kept. But it was cool.
How about the guy that taught you trapping? Do you keep in touch with him? Is it,
it's
having him over the years?
Yeah, he once he went to college, we just kind of lost touch, and his parents moved away, and I just never really stayed in touch with him. He did get a hold of me, I don't know, years ago when I was at the ATA show. It was in Columbus, Ohio, because he still lived in Columbus, and he said he was going to come down and meet me at the show, but he never did. So I never, I waited around for him for about 30 minutes. He never showed up. So who knows?
Yeah.
Those are old friendships from way back in the day.
Wonder if he's still trapping.
No, he's definitely not. Yeah, he became an artist and a cartoonist. So his father was a cartoonist too. So that's what he did, cartoon stuff.
You're a creative guy yourself, aren't you? You like to write stuff. You've got a couple screenplays you've written.
Yeah, I do a little writing here and there, and I love writing books, and I'm working on a new book now, but it's more of a self-help book, more of a motivational type book. I might not even put my name on it. I might call it something else.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe come up with a good ghostwriter name,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's fun stuff. That's one of the bad things too. And you try to get in the mainstream if you're a big time hunter and trapper. There's so many people that are against it that you try to like a lot of people that might be interested in some of your thoughts and some of how you think wouldn't be interested just because they thought, oh, these guys killed animals or he's trapped animals or he's a Trump supporter, whatever. They think that you've got to fit in a certain box. So sometimes if you want to get outside that comfort zone. You know, it doesn't really. I don't need the publicity. You want to help people. You know?
And you want an outlet for your creativity too.
Exactly.
You want to put something else out there.
Exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah.
You play a little guitar too.
A little bit. Yeah. You know, I enjoy it. I have a fantastic guitar collection. Not a lot of people know about it. I haven't talked about it much because you got to keep some of your life private.
Yeah.
You know? You got to
Yeah.
keep some of your life private.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have. I actually have an autographed Brian May Red Special, a real one. There's not very many of those. Yeah, very expensive guitar. I have a Lindsey Buckingham. Earlier I mentioned Fleetwood Mac. You know, but I mean, I have a Lindsey Buckingham guitar, custom made. So I've got, I don't know, 40 guitars or so that are really nice. I have a Hendrix guitar.
Nice.
So yeah, I got some cool stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, I wish I had more time
Yeah.
to play. I
Yeah.
wish I had more time to play. My son's really good. My son's a really good guitar player, and of course he picked up Dad's guitar collection and started playing it when he was young, and one thing led to another. And I keep telling him to go big time with it because he could. I think he could, and but he won't. He's got other ideas. You know, he thinks it's too hard. You know, but I think now, obviously, it's very difficult. And I mean, I've got a lot of friends in the music business. Most of them are country guys. I've never really been into the country music that much. I mean, I've always kind of been a rocker.
Ted Nugent style.
Yeah, well, Nugent's a pal too. But I enjoy the rock and roll music the best. You know, if I'm going to listen to music, that's what I'm going to listen to. But yeah, you know, Craig Morgan's a friend of mine. I could send him songs and he would at least look at them, you know, stuff like that. But anyways,
well, what do you think? I think we've worked you to the bone here enough at the table, but
yeah, lunchtime.
I appreciate you coming out to my family deer camp here.
Absolutely, it's been great, man. It's been awesome.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Getting to know you over the last couple of days.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
You're welcome.